Maybe that's what I really found in New York. Not simply a city celebrating a championship, but a glimpse of humanity's longing to be connected. Welcome back to Faith Keepers. In the previous episode, I shared what I called evidence of a higher power at work. Not because of one dramatic miracle, but because of a series of events that, when I look back, seem to fit together in ways I could have never planned. This trip to New York was one of those moments. What's fascinating is that this trip wasn't planned around a Knicks championship. In fact, it was planned before the Knicks had even made the playoffs. The flights were booked, the dates were chosen, everything was already in motion. When we arrived in New York, the Knicks still hadn't won. We were simply there to spend time with family. And then, while we were there, the Knicks won the championship. Without ever planning it, we found ourselves experiencing one of the biggest moments in New York sports history. Now, this caught my attention, not because I believe that every coincidence is a miracle, but because Faith Keepers has taught me to pay attention to those moments where life seems to reveal a pattern that I never could have arranged myself. Every week on Faith Keepers, I like to leave you with what I'm calling the Faith Keepers Sigma question. Not a question that demands an answer, but one that asks us to look at life a little bit more deeply. And this week's question is this: what happens when events that appear random begin to reveal a deeper pattern? Is it simply coincidence, or are there moments in life that invite us to consider a purpose greater than ourselves? So looking back, what amazes me most isn't that the Knicks won, although that is amazing. It's that the trip was already in place before anyone knew they would, before the playoffs, before the championship, before the city knew what was coming. Could God be doing something here that I didn't recognize at first? When the Knicks won, the city came alive. What surprised me wasn't the celebration, it was the connection. Everywhere we went, people were talking, neighbors were speaking to neighbors, strangers were speaking with strangers. People who otherwise may not have acknowledged each other were suddenly talking. They had something in common. The excitement wasn't confined to Madison Square Garden, it spilled into the restaurants, even into the churches. For a moment, I smiled because New York wasn't just celebrating basketball, it was celebrating being New York. That made me stop and think. What is it really that brings people together? Is it the championship, or is the championship simply a catalyst? One of the questions I've been exploring through Sigma is whether human beings were designed for connection. Maybe what I was witnessing wasn't simply sports. Maybe I was witnessing what happens when millions of individual lives become synchronized around a shared story. So eventually our trip came to an end. We experienced the championship, but we returned home before the parade. And at this point, I thought my New York story had ended. Then something unexpected happened. My cousin won a ticket to attend the championship parade. What followed became its own story. She had run into roadblocks, detours, obstacles, moments where it seemed impossible for her to reach the celebration. And somehow she made it. She stood where I couldn't. She celebrated what I couldn't experience firsthand. And yet, I still found myself celebrating. Her joy became my joy. Her experience became a part of my experience. And that stayed with me because maybe some of life's greatest moments aren't limited to the people who are physically present. Maybe connection allows us to experience life through one another. So before this trip, I thought I was going to explore whether sports fanaticism had crossed the line into idol worship. That was a story I expected, but that's not the story I found. What I found was love. I found neighbors connecting, families celebrating, strangers sharing memories. Before leaving New York, I purchased several extra newspapers. Those newspapers became conversations. They became exchanges. They became opportunities to connect. A shared moment in New York continued creating value long after the celebration ended. That's one of the reasons Sigma has become meaningful to me. What if the deepest longing of the human heart isn't simply to win, but to belong? The Knicks united the city for a season, but God invites us into something even greater, a connection that isn't limited by championships or geography or even time, a connection rooted in love, a connection rooted in purpose, a connection rooted in Him. I'll leave you with this week's Faith Keepers Sigma question. Have you ever experienced something that seemed like coincidence at first, only to look back later and realize it may have been a part of a much bigger story? Maybe the greatest miracles aren't always the ones that suspend the laws of nature. Maybe sometimes they're the moments when we pause long enough to recognize that God has been weaving together a story all along. Until next time, keep the faith.